If you do not mind, then appreciate my efforts by subscribing to my channel. Thank you very much in advance.
Welcome to Special News Channel. The Russian people have unfurled the flag of revolt. Amid growing unrest, there is extraordinary hatred and intolerance towards Vladimir Putin. Russian leader Putin is using his people as bait by sending them to the front unprepared. Vladimir Putin's struggle to recruit soldiers to send them to the front continues. In a desperate effort, Putin put his mobilization into action again. While the call for mobilization of 2 million more Russian citizens, including 300,000 women, fell like a bombshell on the country's agenda. The people stood up again with protests and demonstrations. Russia is literally escalating the Ukraine war. Riots throughout the country do not stop. Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a decree to recruit 300,000 reserve soldiers after the Kiev army continued its offensives and started to take back the lands lost in the war in Ukraine. The Russian Ministry of Defense, on the other hand, announced that the recruitment of reserve soldiers was stopped after the sufficient number of soldiers was reached. Another step came from Putin regarding the partial mobilization decision. With the decree he signed to expand the scope of the partial mobilization law, Vladimir Putin decided to send new soldiers to fight in Ukraine. While the Ukraine war was going on, Vladimir Putin's decision to call soldiers to fight at the front came up again. Protests and demonstrations in Russia, which has been struggling with riots for a long time, have become active again. Russian leader Putin's struggle to recruit soldiers continues. As discontent with Putin grows, Russia is struggling with serious problems in preparing additional troops. The Russian people lost their motivation to fight, and they also lost their trust and faith in their leader. The incoordination of the regular army command in Russia's Ukraine war, such as the Chechen troops fighting with their own commanders, the Wagner mercenaries not taking orders from the regular army, the ammunition and food problems at the front became an important problem, and the Russian army failed in Ukraine for these and many reasons, had decided to withdraw. This failure story of Russian leader Vladimir Putin, which the whole world has followed closely and has mastered the process, goes on and on. Russia, which expected the war to end as it started, could not find what it hoped with the numerous defeats it suffered, and it was almost stuck in the Ukraine impasse that has been going on for 10 months. Now, there is talk of Putin's new move that will fuel the bloody war. In Russia, news of Vladimir Putin's plans to avenge disastrous defeats is already circulating in the media. There is speculation that the Russian leader will demand a major mobilization move in a desperate attempt to stop Ukraine. The move came despite Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's warning that Moscow must withdraw from all occupied territories for a permanent solution to the war. It is also on the agenda that such a move could be a stalling tactic for Putin to resign and hand over power. Kremlin spokesman Peskov stated that it is not correct to make a statement about the mobilization. Yet such denials fuel speculation that the move to go beyond the more than 300 currently conscripts is not far off. One speculation is that the Russian army could recruit up to 2 million soldiers, including 300,000 women, with the aim of turning the war into a national crusade. Russian sources state that the movement will most likely be combined with martial law in key cities, including Moscow. Putin considers it sufficient to call for 2 million more people to mobilize, including about 300,000 women. Mobilization is expected to begin in January. Russian leader Vladimir Putin, on the other hand, has a much more difficult task after this time. Although Putin is currently trying to mobilize people in Russia, he's not inspired to fight against Ukraine. Despite ongoing reports of Russian troops fleeing the war and calling the Ukrainian hotline to surrender, it remains to be seen how Putin will strengthen his army in Ukraine. At the same time, Russian soldiers have to fight chronic health conditions, which has caused the UK defense officials to issue warnings from family members of possible riots in Moscow. The news of the call for mobilization of 2 million more people, 300,000 of whom were women, sparked new uprisings in Russia. The people, who could not stand Putin, took to the streets and held demonstrations. Hundreds of people are detained, and force is used during the protests. Russia, which had been having a hard time both on the territory of Ukraine and with internal turmoil for a long time, did not know what to do in the face of the protests that flared up again. On the other hand, the people again made their way to the border gates to escape from the war. While the uprisings and demonstrations are escalating in Russia, there's a great panic among citizens who take action to flee the country. President Putin's decision to invade Ukraine's territory is costing Russia more and more every day. The loss of soldiers of the Russian army since the beginning of the war has come very closely to 100,000. Especially after the mobilization decision, the loss of soldiers of the Russian army began to increase considerably. The losses of the Russian army are increasing exponentially every day, as the inexperienced mobilized Russian citizens are often on the front lines of the war fronts or in critical areas.